Indiana Jones, It's a podcast about Indiana Jones. Every movie, 1 minute at a time. Indiana Jones Minute.
Welcome back to the Indiana Jones Minute, the daily podcast in which we slide right to the heart of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, 1 minute at a time. I'm Pete Mummert.
I'm Tom Taylor.
I'm Jerry Porter.
And today we're joined by our friends David Stoker and Chris LaSalle from the Star Trek Minute podcast. Welcome, guys. We're glad to have you.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Glad to be here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, this will be fun, I think.
Woo!
You think?
I know. This will be fun.
It's already fun.
Yes.
So he said, it shall be fun.
And today we're here to talk about Minute 19. Minute 19 begins with a very Hoth-looking explosion, has a nice view of India's Grand Canyon, and ends with our heroes enjoying some whitewater rafting.
And the very first thing we see in this minute is some 1984 not in space special effects, which plagued. It feels like have plagued. I was going to say all 80s summer blockbusters, but I don't know. It seems like daytime of this kind of explosion and this kind of effect, like we're putting something over existing film. It just never. Yeah. Apparently, space is very forgiving to that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like with matte lines and just making it seem like it's in the same image and stuff like that. But this one's a little, there's an explosion that just kind of like fades away. It's like not there anymore.
Yeah.
No, like debris or anything.
I was going to say, my note is, did you guys notice a TIE fighter exploding into the mountain?
I got him!
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like to me. Now, I understand it's the same guys doing it, so you're like, sure.
Well, I was thinking it's like early 80s ILM special.
Right.
What I don't get here is that looks like they actually crashed something, whether it's a model or not. Like, why couldn't they put explosions in that? That would have looked more realistic than this.
Yeah, there are like pieces that like come out and fall and stuff. But yeah, I see.
There's like one little part of the fuselage that actually just looks like it's the whole fuselage. You're like, you guys, it's the entire plane, and it just kind of wilts down after the explosion. There's like a wilting thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I guess that's good they weren't on that.
A kid just threw it against the snow mound in the backyard.
You're like, if that's your explosion, they probably would have been fine.
Yeah.
Had they stayed on the plane.
Right. The sound effect for that explosion should just be like a kid just going blam.
And then they drained all the fuel out of the plane, too. Should it really have exploded?
That's a really good point.
That's a really good point.
Left on it.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's why it's sort of a wilted.
Well, it should have just been like a clunk.
Yeah.
That's probably what it actually did, because I thought it was, like Dave said the same thing. I thought it was a real plane that they actually just slammed into the mountain, and maybe it just went thud. And they're like, well, that was boring.
Oh, yeah, we better...
Well, yeah. So the one thing I was thinking about in terms of this, so we're coming off Wrath of Khan, and that was made in 1982 with a budget of $11 million. And we got to admit that the special effects were good. They weren't great. But the budget for this movie was twice as much. It was $28 million.
Yeah.
2 years later, like, you think they would have been able to invest some of that money into a better explosion.
But you know what's weird is like this is like Industrial Light and Magic, like the state-of-the-art, cream of the crop guys. And not to jump ahead, but I remember that similar effects in Last Crusade are even worse. They're like very, very bad in Last Crusade.
Yeah.
They're like
with the biplane and stuff.
Yeah. It's very like choppy and weird, and like there's something weird going on, and like I don't know, maybe they just did so much stuff on Star Wars they figured they had it figured out. But like then they're like, we gotta do this against a blue sky? Oh, okay. That's trickier.
Yeah, that red paint for Mola Ram's head's not cheap. So this is one thing I liked about you guys being on for this minute is there are several scenes in these next couple of minutes that are filmed in locations quite close to locations where Star Trek movies were filmed. And we've got they start doing this rafting run down the Crest Ridge ski run in Mammoth Mountain, which is just over the mountain from Owens Valley where they filmed Nimbus 3 in Star Trek 5.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. You had to go there, didn't you?
It's like when people bring up Crystal Skull on here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, that's our crystal skull, yes.
I think I said on your show that I'm kind of into Star Trek 5 after all these years.
Yeah, and we still couldn't believe it either.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time believing it, but I said it, so...
It has its moments, I will give you that. But overall, not a good movie.
I never said it was good. How about that? I'm just kind of into it, maybe.
Guilty pleasure?
Maybe, yeah.
Well, I mentioned, I think, last episode that whole raft coming out of the airplane, that apparently was a real shot and a one shot, like they did one take of it. Did you guys come across? Out? Yeah, the raft coming out and like all the all the way down to when they hit the snow. And so I did a little bit more research, and there was all sorts of that. Apparently, where George Lucas lives in San Anselmo, there was a whitewater rafting, I think it was a raft maker. And Pete, did you read any of this?
No, I love that though.
Oh yeah, there was a raft maker. And you know what? I'm just going to, if you guys will indulge me, I'll just read. It was actually on the Mental Floss article, Fun Facts About Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And they said, no stuntmen, they didn't really jump out of the plane, but the practical effect itself is real. Because in the 80s, Lucasfilm, their location was near a raft manufacturer. And since the filmmakers were having a tough time figuring out how to logistically pull off the stunt, producer Frank Marshall went over and challenged the manufacturer to come up with a way to have the parachute effect play out practically in a single shot for the movie. And apparently they did it, and that was the shot they got. They just did it once, wow. And the cameraman gave them like a thumbs up, and that's it. And it's the irony is that everybody thinks like, oh, that would never happen. Yeah. Like, that's so fake. And it's like, well, it actually was a real shot.
Yeah, not only that, but then
the Mythbusters guys said it was a real, like, you could survive it.
Yeah, that's insane.
I thought they said so they did a Mythbusters episode and they said you wouldn't survive it, but they did another one where you could potentially survive it.
Oh,
so they did two. I remember seeing two different episodes.
Well, wait a minute. What's the point of having Mythbusters?
So they busted their own myth? That's funny.
Myth denters.
Well, actually, you know what? I thought a lot about this this week. And so what I did is, because they're on the American River, right? Part of it is, I don't know how you pronounce it, is the Tuolumne River?
Tuolumne, yeah.
Tuolumne, thank you, Pete. In near Yosemite, right? And then some of it's filmed on the American River. Mm-hmm. And so I called a couple of whitewater rafting places on the American River, and I asked them, hey, do you guys see? I mean, it took me, you have to warm up to these people. They're like, why are you calling? And you're like, well,
I've got work to do.
Remember this? Yeah, it's exactly like 7th grade. Remember that scene in Indiana Jones when?
Will you be my friend? I'm really lonely.
No. And then you have to go, it's the Temple of Doom. It's the Temple of Doom, that one. And the raft comes out, and they land on the river, and then it's a dial tone.
Then you call the next raft place.
I did. I called a couple of raft places. And
you finally made a
the
friend.
fascinating thing was, one guy said, actually, no, the way that raft, because it goes on the snow and then it goes over the rocks, right? Mm-hmm. Almost like a moraine. It's like all of a sudden they're going over the rocks and then they go over the cliff and then it lands in the water. And the one raft guy was like, there's no way that raft could sustain that sort of damage and be able to work when it gets to the bottom of the river. Yeah. It's going to be all torn to shreds, and you're going to be sinking and the whole thing. It's not going to be in a good place.
You know what? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and then when I spoke to a separate rafting place. They said that actually the rafts are made of, I think it was PVC and something was called like Hypalon. And they said they're actually really sturdy, and they could see that it would be, certainly today's raft could potentially sustain that sort of fall and damage and going over the rocks and meeting an Indian guy too.
See, I like going into this scene, I was just fat, like, because we've been talking about this scene since like Raiders, because this is one of the scenes that they spitballed like in the story conferences for Raiders, and they couldn't find a place to stick it in. So Spielberg, I guess, had this idea in his head like since before Raiders, and then he finally got to do it in this movie. And I'm watching it and I'm thinking, gosh, why was he so married to this ridiculous idea that would obviously never work? But then like last episode, Pete was saying, no, they proved that it would work. He wouldn't get killed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to rethink everything, because like maybe this makes total sense. But now there's more doubt. And so I don't know how to feel.
Well, how about, so when I was a kid, I love this minute because it reminds me of like my favorite times we would go on vacation as a kid. And one thing we would do sometimes is in Colorado, we would go inner tubing.
Oh, cool.
Which is like you'd get on a big inner tube and you'd just slide down the mountain. And it reminded me a lot of, like, it behaved a lot like this raft. And it was incredibly dangerous because you'd kind of like once in a while you'd start bouncing, and when you started bouncing, you just start bouncing higher and higher and higher.
Oh my god!
But it worked. Like, it was a really fun thing to do. So like when I see them going down on the raft, I'm like, man, this just looks fun.
Well, I've always wanted to go whitewater rafting. Have you guys, other than you, Pete? Has anybody ever done that?
I have.
I've never been.
Once.
Yeah, it's just like this. Other than falling off the cliff.
Yeah, so they throw you off the cliff first and then you go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
you have to pay
lady's
extra for that.
berating you the whole time, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Just one of the things someone mentioned, I think it was you, Jerry, that mentioned it when they cross over the snow line onto the rock or whatever. That one always stood out to me, and it bothered me. And it's like, is that real, or is that is that naturally occurring? Is that what it actually looks like when snow transitions? And so I had a big question mark, and so I was digging in. This is going to sound self-serving, but it's not. I was trying to think. I was trying to place. I'm like, I've seen something like this before. No joke. In Search for Spock, there's a scene. There's a scene when Savick and David are down on the Genesis planet and they're walking through things, and they cross over from desert into snow.
Yeah, but the point is that planet is crazy and like totally weird, and like there's cactuses with snow on them and stuff.
But now I think I believe it. It's more believable because here it is right here.
Yeah. There's nothing weird about the Genesis planet now because you're seeing it in
Not at all.
1935 on Earth.
See, that shot really upset me. And I don't know why, but it's what you said. You're like, they're on the snow.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, the way they film it, you're like, oh, they're going to land on the rocks and then they're going to slow down naturally. It looks like they've made it. And that's fine. But then the very next scene, they're careening what looks like on snow again.
Yes. Oh, right. Yeah.
I know.
Rear
Somebody's
projection.
going to say, well, listen, sometimes mountains have snow, Jerry, and sometimes they have rocks, and then sometimes it goes back to snow.
Right. No, but that it does seem unnatural, just like solid snow, and then it stops, and there's just solid dirt. That does seem completely weird.
Yeah.
Also, you know what? I'm just watching it now. I think it's just also bad editing.
It totally. I agree with Jerry there that it goes from snow. You sort of see the raft go by the dirt, and then you see the front picture of them.
Yeah.
And then it's all snow again. It's like, that's really bad editing.
That is because they don't like when you're not looking at them, like they're the actors in the raft. All you've seen is them go from snow to dirt, and the next time you see the raft in long shot, they're going off the cliff. So yeah, it's like they didn't film any, whatever rear projection stuff for that shot with just the dirt in the background or something. And they thought we wouldn't notice.
I do love though when they do that, they like when they show Indy and he's on the right and Short Round's in the middle and Willie's on the left, and it looks exactly like a scene from like a late 50s sitcom where the TV family's driving, like dad's driving and mom's in the passenger seat and the kids in the middle. And it like they would make a great sitcom family.
They kind of would. Somebody will do that someday.
Pete, stop it. Yeah, stop.
That's going to be part of the...
Squash that right now.
That's phase 3 of the big Disney reboot when they get to it in a couple of years.
Well, you got a choice. You could have this or you could have Mutt in there, Jer. So maybe take what you got.
Pete, we're trying to keep this all above the horizon here.
Two-fisted Pete over here. Oh, my God.
We're trying to... Remember we had that whole little talk about we got to keep things on the, up and positive? Now we got Mutt and we got, the Joneses.
Well, speaking of the rear projection stuff, though, it obviously looks really kind of crummy, like really obvious. Like, yeah, they're in like a thing, just someone's bouncing it from beneath or something, and there's a screen behind them and stuff. But the most forgiving thing I can say about that is that movies now, it feels like so many movies still have not mastered that. Like even today in like the technical vastness of 2000, whatever this is, so many of those shots that you see today are still like, I'm a guy in front of a screen. That whatever's behind me is clearly not behind me. And it always amazes, like, why do they even attempt these shots if they can't do them? Like, do they really need to like cut to Harrison Ford and Kate Capshaw in the thing? Like we're going to get that it's them. We saw them jump out of the plane. We know who they are. Do we really need to cut back to them to those really like awkward shots?
I find though I'm a fan of rear projection. There's something comforting about it, and I think it's probably because it's been around for so long, right? It's in everything. You go back to black and white films, and the fact that they just keep going back to it. I don't know. It almost fits in a way, where this movie's taking place in the 30s. It's in a way it makes it fit more. So yeah, I'm a fan.
This makes me think of Airplane, and I half expect to see them. I half expect to see them like hitting the bicycle guy, and the guy shaking his fist, going.
A bunch of guys on horses are chasing him and stuff, and yeah.
It does look like that though.
Yeah, and I guess you're right. There is something sort of charming about like, wow, like they did this in the 30s, and they're still doing it now.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
As the resident, Indiana Jones experts, and we have this shot of them going off the cliff. There's a cliff fall in all of the Indiana Jones movies. Is that true? Is there someone or something falling off a cliff in every single one of them?
There is, yeah. Well, it's Qui-Gon Jinn said, there's always a bigger cliff.
I think Pete's depressed or something. I don't know what's going on. He keeps going all these really dark places.
Quoting the prequels. Yikes.
Well, that does, now that you mention it, I will say I talked to my sister, Professor Christy Porter, and she had one note for this minute, which I'd like to share. She said if you look closely on that cliff shot, there is a ghost of a Jeep in the cliff.
With a single tear.
Bringing that up. Yeah, it does look a lot like...
I can tell you why.
Uh-oh.
Please.
Yeah, so I love this minute. This is one of my favorite minutes in the movie because so much reminds me of my childhood. And the part that most reminds me of my childhood is this cliff is the Snake River Canyon in Idaho. And if you were an Evel Knievel fan, this was exactly the spot where he tried to launch his rocket cycle over the canyon, and the parachute opened too early in 1974, and he crashed into the river, like pretty much where they did. But there were a bunch of houses and stuff in the background of the shot, so they had to mat them out. And so I think that's probably what happened with the Jeep. Yeah.
Wow. Oh. This, it looks a lot like the Gobler Cliff in
totally.
Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, is that Evel Knievel too?
No, I think that was actually Tunisia. I think this.
What was it? I just wondered.
I think Evel Knievel was trying to recreate Gobler driving off the cliff.
Yeah.
So they failed, but I'm going to make it.
Well, I had a question for you guys too. The inflatable raft is stenciled on the side, South China Airlines, right?
Yeah.
So do you think that Lao Che stole the raft from South China Airlines?
No, he would never steal anything.
Well, or is Lao Che's air fleet like a subsidiary of South China Airlines? Like they maybe farm it out?
See, I think Lao Che has the same. He kind of does the same things all the time, and you know how he kind of had Indy come into the club, and he made him bring him the Nurhaci ashes in exchange for a diamond. See, I think he made a guy come into the club with a raft that he stole from South China Airlines. And, like, he did the whole poison thing. It's just like Friday night at Club Obi-Wan.
It's just like a barter thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a raft,
So-
leave a raft. We actually finally get some dialogue after they don't die falling off a cliff. And I don't want to be like Pete and be just hopelessly negative the whole time, but the little exchange here is very forced, and I'm not into it. The whole, like, I hate being wet or whatever, and I hate you. It's like very strange.
She gets like that monster voice.
Yeah.
I had that. That was my note. I like the "I hate you."
Oh, you like it? Okay.
Yeah, I do too.
Oh yeah. No, it's very on character for her, I think.
Well, and I had a note about that, and I was just wondering here. This is a little personal minute. Have any of you guys ever been on the receiving end of the low you? Like, have you ever been, and I hate you. Like, have any of you guys ever been on the receiving end of the low you?
Oh, sure.
We wouldn't be doing a podcast if we hadn't been.
Yeah, really.
To kind of get away from all those low
Yeah, really.
yous.
Well, maybe, I'm thinking maybe what bugs me more about this little exchange is Indy's good. He responds to the "I hate you" with "good," and it's like,
Yeah.
well, is this supposed to be banter or isn't it? Like, this isn't exactly Nick and Nora Charles going on here. Like, you step it up just a little bit. Like, good. I don't know if that's the best comeback.
It's a borderline hostile / flirty. It's you're not quite
Yeah.
getting there
Oh.
yet.
But
Really?
it's
I didn't take it as flirty at all. This is just feels hatred.
I think here it's like pure hatred, but I think it's like supposed to be like, this is the tile that you put in of this part of the mosaic of them as like the bickering, bantering, eventually they're going to love each other kind of slapstick comedy kind of coupling. But I don't know, a lot of it just kind of falls it doesn't ring as true as it should, or it's not as satisfying as it should be sometimes.
Well, they just fell 2,000 feet off this cliff.
Yeah.
And
There's
then
some stress there.
they landed. I mean, they landed in a raging, rapids, and I just think like maybe it's not a good time for that sort of, banter.
Yeah.
Like that.
Like, you're not supposed to
Yeah,
go to
it's-
bed angry, but you're also not
Yeah.
supposed to, try to work it out while you're falling off a cliff.
That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Maybe it's a little forced that way, and given the scene and the gravity of the situation, pardon the pun.
That was good.
That shot though, where she actually yells in his face, you, and
Yeah.
it's another one of those. It's not. I don't think it is a rear projection in this case, but you could almost see the stagehands like throwing water at them into their face.
pushing the raft down.
Yeah.
Oh, let's make this move. Yes, that's
Yeah.
And she switches positions at some point, doesn't she? Like, she's on
I think,
she's on the right before they go off the cliff, and then when they're in the water, she's on the other side all of a sudden.
Yes.
Notice that.
that's going to happen a few times more. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, probably.
I think the raft. I think the raft actually spins around in the water when they first land.
Oh, and now they're like
yeah.
facing the back.
Actually, I think you're right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the raft hits and sort of
Yeah.
turns them around. That's why she appears on the other side.
Oh,
Nice.
this movie's
Well,
rock
see,
solid.
they're way ahead of us on a lot of this stuff. Yeah, the plane doesn't have any fuel.
So I have a question. I guess as we're getting close to the end here, I have a question, and this almost last shot where the camera's behind them and we see Indy's hat is ruined.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it going to bounce back?
As his short rounds.
Yeah, is that going to bounce back, or does he have multiple hats? Because we know later on in the film his hat's fine, right? But I can't imagine that hat coming back from. It would be funny to see the hat like that through the whole film.
It gets soaked in Raiders when he, at the very beginning when he's, swimming over to the plane, to Jock's plane, and then later on it's fine. But unless he has like 1,000 of those hats, yeah.
Yeah, maybe this stuff is just a bag full of hats.
Just in case.
Or maybe it's just one of those, hey, listen, they don't take the art of hat making seriously, these days. Like back then you could do that. You could swim to Jacques' plane. You could, careen off a 2,000-foot cliff, and you can have somebody give you the low hate you. Your hat's going to be fine.
Those are the days.
Just don't make them like they used to.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, great. Anybody have anything else for this minute?
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
No.
Well, David and Chris, could you tell the listeners if they're interested in finding more about you guys and listen to your show, where they can find you?
Sure. Yeah. We can be found at StarTrekMinute.com. We do a podcast where we're also breaking down the Star Trek films 1 minute at a time. We're on hiatus right now between Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock, but we'll be back soon, I think. So yeah, you can find us StarTrekMinute.com, or we're on Twitter at Star Trek Minute, and come check us out.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Pete and I have both been guests on your show, and it was awesome.
Yeah, loved it.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, listen to it every week.
You should get Jared in there because he knows nothing about Star Trek, and he's almost proud of it.
That would be.
Oh, is that true? That would be fantastic.
Yes.
Put him on the spot now, Tommy.
It's my job.
Tom, if people wanted to come and tell us what they think about Jerry not knowing anything about Star Trek, where could they do that?
You can go to IndianaJonesMinute.com. That's our website where you can find all our old episodes and all our new episodes and lots of other stuff. And you can join the conversation. The best place to yell at Jerry is at the Indiana Jones Minute and the Listeners Crusade group on Facebook. And you can also get in touch with us on Twitter at Indiana Jones Min. And we'd love to hear from you and let us know what you think about stuff.
Please do.
Please do.
And you can also find us right back here tomorrow, Friday, for minute 20 of the Indiana Jones Minute.
You.
Khan.
Come on.
Come on!